Welcome to the Bx2Path Show, where we dive deep into the realms of education and financial literacy. We blend insights on college education, career prospects, and the necessary financials to stay on your path. I'm your host, Dheeraj Naraharisetti, and today I am thrilled to have our co-host, Dr. Gordon Chiu. Dr. Chiu is not just an author, innovator, investor, and scientist, but also a visionary who has completed Wharton's Advanced Management Program and Harvard's Business Analytics Program. He has co-founded his startup Fingra in February of 2023, who has won that year's Global Tech Technology Prize in the Harvard Business School New Venture Competition. In this episode, me and Dr. Chiu are going to talk about why the original interview question I had planned for today was not as up to par. Are you there, Dr. Chiu?
I'm right here.
Okay.
All right. Well, why was it not up to par? Well, I think that today's interview question that you
Mhm.
originally wanted to talk about was about some famous individuals and what they did in sixth grade, right? Or what they did when they were younger,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And one of those individuals is very famous. It's Mark Zuckerberg, and then there's Jason Wang, who won the biology Olympiad, learning biology at sixth grade. Um, and Mark learning how to code when he's at sixth grade. So what's really important is I don't know which sixth graders are listening to this, but it's about them, not about me or you, or Mark Zuckerberg, or Jason Wang, because what human beings tend to do is after we hear a story, we say, "All right, let me go and do exactly what they are doing." Or worse yet, is the parents listen to this and then they tell their kids, do exactly what that person did. And let's make it funny. Let's just sing like Elvis. Let's make sure you sing exactly like Elvis, even sound like Elvis.
Mhm.
Guess what's going to happen, right? People are going to come by. They're going to see that you don't sound like Elvis. So then
Yeah.
they're going to leave and say, "Oh, what a terrible this kid doesn't sound like Elvis." And then if
Yeah.
occasionally though, you will find a kid that sounds just like Elvis.
Yeah.
And now they sound like Elvis. And then people still leave and they move on. So
Because
so
why
you
would you
see,
want him if
right.
there's Elvis himself?
Yeah, I mean, why do you want to sound like Elvis, right? So either you fail and you don't sound like Elvis, or
Mhm.
you succeed and you do sound like Elvis. But the problem is that doesn't help you. But you now spent all this time practicing to sound like Elvis, right? So if I entertain the question of Mark Zuckerberg learning to code on in sixth grade, then guess who's listening? It's not just the sixth grade. In fact, usually sixth graders don't listen to stuff like this. It's the parents that listen to this, right?
Mhm.
And then they tell their sixth grader, you need to listen to this, or they just listen to it, and then they they find that this is what I need to do for my sixth grader, which is the code or the math Olympiad, right? The answer really isn't to do like anybody's story, but really to develop something unique for themselves as a sixth grader.
How do you find that and um unique thing that works for you, that's just for you? Because
First of
like,
all,
yeah.
stop listening to anything that talks about other people,
Hmm.
right? Get rid of all that, right? Yeah. If you start listening to, oh, this is what so and so did at sixth grade, this is what so and so did in their life, that that doesn't help you. It takes up all that time. Do you remember the summer reading list that you used to have when you were in high school? Right?
Yeah, yeah, even in middle school.
Yeah. Right. Um, what would that? What do you think about reading all those books?
Well, a lot of them were about some fictions, but many of them were about stories of other people, like inspirational stories mainly of how one person did XYZ and became what he is today.
Well, did like I mean, didn't you have to read some books from the Victorian period or like poetry or things like that in your English class?
Oh yeah, of course we did. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you feel about reading that stuff? Did you like it? Was it
No,
like
I mean, we read it because we had to.
you read it because you had to? So there you go. Right. And now do you keep reading? Like, do you continue to read those types of books on your own?
No,
No.
no,
So do you think that you are so different from the hundreds of thousands of sixth graders in this country, or in the world? There'll be millions of them. They probably don't like reading stuff like that.
no, they
Right.
don't.
Yeah. So now you're wondering, like, that whole summer, why did you do it? The kids who do better in classes, they do all their assignments. But that doesn't mean that that's unique. It's actually more unique if you don't do your assignments, actually, right? Depending on the type of class you're in. If you don't, if you don't do your assignments, but then you fall behind. So you're trusting the assignments lead you to somewhere. And when we talk about self-discovery, that may not be the right answer.
I see.
But right, but we know that we if we don't listen to other successful stories, then we end up we don't end up not motivating ourselves. That's why we read motivational books and we do those things. But I'm asking the question of what happens if we actually hear those stories and we end up copying what those people do, like that Elvis example.
Well, obviously, it wouldn't work out because everyone's different, different circumstances, different.
Let's use the coding example. Right? So let's say you do code because you heard Mark Zuckerberg code at sixth grade and you want to be as successful as Mark Zuckerberg, right? And don't you think Mark Zuckerberg, people around him also tried to do coding because they saw that, and then do you think that all of those people also became Mark Zuckerbergs?
No, no, no.
Well, no. Okay, so that's interesting, right? So how do you like if you don't use the coding example and start using like, okay, study to become a doctor, right? And
Mm.
then how many people become a doctor and are successful, right?
Many.
Many, because doctor took many, many years, right? But then did we look at the sacrifice that they made? Number one is that, and also is it that people who weren't doctors and did other things, pursued other things, that they were not successful, right? So you start having to look at the data, right? And need to also look at the range, right, of
Mhm.
success. So it's not just success is versus failure, but the range of, for example, is someone who's a doctor um, successful and free to travel and live wherever they want to once they are a doctor, or when you're a doctor that you have to be near hospitals or in certain areas so that you get enough patients, right, who can
So I
afford it,
think
right?
it's like trying to find your passion is mainly starts off with making a list of what you really want.
How do you know that when you're so young, though?
I mean, I think everybody knows what they, I mean, not knows what they
Really?
want, but
I didn't know what I wanted.
I mean, there's so much things to want, right? Like
I
fame,
still don't
money.
know what I want, right?
Uh-huh, I see.
Yeah. I don't really know what I want, but I do know how I'd like to feel, though. I'd
Uh-huh.
like to feel happy. I'd like to have freedom. I'd like to feel free, right? Those feelings, I think a lot of people want to feel that way,
Hmm.
right? Like, work from home. A lot of people like that because they could also hand in their assignments and also,
Spend time with your family.
right? You can be paid. Like, it's being paid is really important because you have bills to pay and other things, right? So we all want things, but we want the freedom, right? So how about studying from home? Like going to school, except through home. Remember how you had to do that during
Yeah,
certain times in COVID, right?
yeah,
Wasn't
yeah.
that great? You could just roll out of bed and and
Yeah, it
and
was
like
perfect.
learn, right? Okay, so didn't you like that and enjoy that?
No, yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Why can't we keep doing that?
It's not ideal.
Was going to school ideal though? You just said you liked the other one more. So, maybe what is ideal, right? Ideal is where you enjoy it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Right. So you're saying it's not ideal, but you're also saying that you enjoyed it. So I think enjoyment is ideal. Right. So there's a lot of things that we like, but sometimes we don't get to know what we really like. For example, go back to the being the doctor kind of thing, right? So imagine you get into medical school, and then you know that your peers are going to look at you as inferior if you're just a family doctor or internal medicine guy or person, right?
Yeah.
Because or girl, because if you think about in medical school, the smartest people are like going to become the brain surgeons, right? People who do surgeries, right?
Yeah.
If you're all you're doing is following a flow chart and prescribing medicines, you're not the smartest person in the room,
No, you're
especially
not.
amongst your peers. So you're like the lowest on the phone pole. I don't know about radiology. What do you think? If you just read X-rays, is that considered
I mean, it pays very
increase?
well.
Huh?
I mean, it pays very, very well.
Yeah, but you're looking at it from a high schooler's perspective, going to become a college person, right? So that's where you are. But someone in sixth grade, they're going to look at, oh, doctor is amazing. But now I'm talking about someone who's in medical school. Pretend you're in medical school, and you tell people, oh, I'm going to study to become a radiologist, or I'm going to study to become a family doctor, right? And then next to you in your class are people who are studying to become a brain surgeon, right? So, is there such a thing as certain professions within medicine are considered smarter than others?
They are. It's,
You believe there are, right?
yeah, many.
Yeah. So, like for example, if you studied, forget about medical school, and you said, "I want to become a vet. I want to see like pets and things like that." Is that considered higher or lower than someone who wants to be a brain surgeon?
Lower, lower.
Why is it lower? They might pay really well. Like people might like love their pets and pay you lots, right?
Well, I
But
feel
why?
like
Why?
it just commands more respect from society. Society has
Hmm.
declared,
So society. So how do
and
we?
it
How do?
provides more value to society.
Okay, value to society. So treating human beings are more value than treating animals.
Yeah. Mhm.
Like for example, let's say you're a vet at the zoo, right? No, that's not like attractive on a show. Remember show and tell day? Like you bring your parents in, and they say to tell you what they do, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And then what about if you were if your profession was president of the United States?
That's very, very respectable.
Yeah,
But
right. Yeah, I mean, is it? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, hopefully it continues to be, right?
yes,
But there are some times where that could be challenging too, right?
yes. Mhm.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is that we have to really think deeply about what people say. Do you know there's a famous situation where Henry Ford, do you know who that is?
Yeah, founder of Ford Motors.
Okay, so Ford Motors. Um, he said that if he asked his friends what he should do, right, his friends would have said, and people around him would have said, that I want a faster horse. At the time, right? That's what people use to get around. A horse, they want a faster horse. They wouldn't say, I want an automobile, right?
No, they were not.
So he didn't ask people around him. He just went ahead and did it,
Hmm.
right? So if you listen to a bunch of podcasts and different things, first thing you do is you listen to podcasts telling you what types of people, what kinds are successful. There's so many podcasts like that out there. I don't want to be one of those people, right? I think that we don't have to replicate what's already replicated, right? We want to be asking every sixth graders, parents especially who listen to this, is find out what your kids want to feel like when they're older. Not what they want to become, but what they want to feel like. Um, yeah, and then try to find things around what they are good and skilled at and develop those skills,
But
right?
so
How do you want to feel when you grow up, when you grow older?
well, I want to feel respected. I want to feel when I walk in the room, I want to have a lot of respect. I want people to see that, oh, that's Dheeraj Naraharisetti. That's the type of person I want to be.
Have people always pronounced your name properly?
No, no.
No, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's important. Wouldn't you say to pronounce your name properly, right? Yeah,
Yes.
so commanding respect, right?
Mhm.
Who didn't pronounce your name correctly?
Teachers, friends.
Yeah, so maybe they just didn't respect you enough. Is that respect or or what is it, right? Right?
It's
But I'm
really,
sure that
yeah,
you also had people who did pronounce your name correctly, right? So,
many.
yeah, many. So it might be just random, just like Henry Ford, right? Around him at the time, these people, all they wanted was a faster horse.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So one more question I had, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes young people feel pressure to choose between their passions and more practical career paths. So what advice would you give to these struggling with this decision?
I think we need to set the record straight is get rid of the confusion. First of all, when you go to school, you're being tested on material that's some oftentimes is 1,000 years old. So,
Mhm.
and other times it's 500 years old. So it's definitely hundreds of years old, right? And then you've got kids who don't do well on that hundreds of years old material. And because we are a society that sorts people based on how they do, they get thrown in the pile of, wow, this is stuff from hundreds of years old and you can't even do well on it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's why society, just like mispronouncing your name, they kind of don't respect you, right? So what you have to do is get in the mindset of this stuff is hundreds of years old. I will not allow myself to be embarrassed by hundreds of year old material where I get the answer wrong, right? We all know that that's bad stuff because it's just ancient, right? And old stuff, but arithmetic has been around for a very long time. So does that mean that, oh, because it's so old, I can't add 5 plus 3, right? Do you know what would happen if you can't add 5 plus 3, right? Then
Ex- Yeah,
based on a capitalistic society, right? Or on a competition-based society,
hmm
you'd like you'd have a problem. Now, I'm using examples that everybody gets, right? So
yeah,
imagine if I asked you, what is momentum made of, right? And you didn't know its mass and velocity, right? Then how are you eventually going to work on sending, human beings in rockets and into outer space and doing it? Like, why would they be interested in you, right?
exactly,
Yeah. And how do you protect your moat so that you can continue to go there when everybody just wants you to be a doctor and they're not even talking about the differences between a family doctor and a brain surgeon,
hmm
right? They don't know enough to look at those differences. The people who ask you what you want to be when you grow up. Now, the people who ask you how you want to feel when you grow older, those people obviously know the other question, right? But they choose not to ask it because they know that what you may need to be working on hasn't arrived yet, right?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, it hasn't arrived yet. I mean, I went to Harvard. You mentioned it on the introduction, and I studied AI. I didn't go to Harvard to study religion. I didn't do it to study, I don't know, English or something like that, history. I didn't go and study general sciences. I didn't go to study business there. I went to study artificial intelligence long before this whole stuff with ChatGPT and all this other stuff, right? Long before that. Why? Because I saw it was important. And Harvard happened to be offering the ability to just study that and the architecture between the AI, not the programming side of it. So I don't
mm,
want to be a programmer. Not that we didn't have to learn some programming languages like Python and other things like that, but you know, that's not what we're about. And if I gave you um, what I submitted to Professor Henry Leitner, uh,
hmm
Professor Leitner um, was um, was Mark Zuckerberg's professor.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it just happens to be. I mean, so yeah. I mean, it's always easy to impress when if you say it that way. But if I said, yeah, Professor Leitner was my professor, um, nobody really looks at, like, who is this, right? So, and who is Professor Leitner? But then once you leave a big name, right, like Mark Zuckerberg, everybody says, "Oh wow, yeah." But what's interesting about the story is I submitted a programming answer. I was the first one to submit it, and my answer was correct. So it got his attention, being first to submit. But it was so long that he actually said no one's ever submitted such a long programming answer to him in his history. I'm not a programmer, and I made it very obvious by my
Mhm.
answer. Even though it was a math question that was correct, the length of it was laughable.
Mhm.
He put in his recommendation that I graduate with distinction at Harvard.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I got his attention, right? That way. And
Mhm.
so, and then how did you learn all that coding that you could produce such a long answer? Well, I just had a lot of time on my hands because I've been retired, what, 30, 40, some people, depending on how you count it, right? Some people even say 50 times, right? Because you retire from different projects, different things, and then you get to work on it. So retirement is actually a really interesting topic because most people get to retire once. Some of them are forced to retire, and some people, after the first year of retirement, they die. Others retire and they live so long that they run out of money. So
Mhm.
retirement is actually a really hard thing to master. Therefore, you should retire many times, as many as you can. I'm trying to do more, right?
What
So
do you mean
that,
retire many times? You're going
yeah,
to retire.
so you work on a project, you succeed on it, all right, and then you like fire yourself, right? That's one way to do it. There's other ways is you work on a project at a company and then you in your success, when you're successful and they have a good impression of it, you move on and do something else. Now,
Mhm.
most people will not do that, right? Because let's say you're at the NBA and you're really good at scoring, things like that. Um, you just say, "Oh, I'm done. I'm going to go do learn and do something else." Wow, that's like a career suicide. Yes, career suicide is one of the components of getting yourself to be able to retire many times. Because if you just like stick yourself with a knife and then in the internal organ, then you vital organ, then you do have to find another fuel source. So how did I do it? I did it in graphene, and I went to become a high school teacher, right? And we do before graphene, I was in an area of the H1N1 virus, and I left that and then went to another project in wood and polymers, and then from there I went into another project, right? So in modulating into the different projects, one was brain computer interface, putting a chip inside of the brain of the animal so that you could tell whether or not the animal would still be able to have an addiction. Now, why does that matter with human beings? Is because some people are addicted. Imagine if we could get them off their addiction through a gamification device where they play it and they run into the consequences of cocaine addiction and they learn through the consequences of being less addicted. Like they learn without having to suffer the consequences, right? And
Nice.
then why that's important is it goes into opiates. Like a lot of people with fentanyl, they're stuck. Societal costs are too high. Imagine if you're able to do that and get around it, right? Then I went into plastics. I had a TED talk around plastics, and I wanted to put graphene in plastics. It took 10 years before that actually became a reality. So for the 9 years, it looked like I was just a kook, right? So right, I mean, to certain people, it was like you're just trying to do the impossible, and that's just not going to work. It was staying with it, doing things, and then, as you know from many interviews, I then went into real estate after teaching,
Mhm.
built it into into a platform where it sustains me, and I do things, and then
Funds
right,
Fingra.
and then you keep talking about in every introduction about Fingra. That's after I went to Harvard to study AI, and then I launched out Fingra in what asphalt, right? So that's kind of retiring, right? All right, and then you also know the healthcare products and the skincare and all that other stuff that I do on the Asia stuff and all those interviews that people can look me up online. You do that too? But you did that when you were in your 20s for other people, and then you worked on fish oils, the other things. My point is that you should not let anything become your boundary. Stop setting goals. Setting goals leads to failure because at the top of your goal, you're going to celebrate and you're going to think, I should stay with where I am. But then you're not going to become an expert. You're not going to get a PhD in retirement,
No.
let alone a master's in retirement or a bachelor's of retirement. Like retirement is a study of what do you do when no one cares anymore, right? No one's asking. No one, and you wake up in the morning with incredible drive. I'm going to go and do this. Remember those pictures I sent you of reactors and other things? Remember of space stuff I would send you, right? We
Yeah,
would have these meetings, right? What the like? Why do you even do this? Why bother? And I then point you to John F. Kennedy. He said he has a quote: "Is that we go to the moon not because it's easy. We go to the moon because we can. It's because it's hard.
hmm
Yeah,
show
right.
that
Yeah. So that what? So that someone can give you $1 million? No, don't qualify that. Just do it
you can.
because it's hard, right? Work
Yeah,
on why become like perfect on your grades as a sixth grader? Because that stuff is so basic. You you do not even want to embarrass yourself by getting a lower score than 100. Well, then you say, "Wow, isn't that such a different approach than let me get 100 because I want to be number one?" What if you don't want to be number one anymore, right? Being number one is not fun, right? Being number two is worse than number one because now you're always thinking you could be number one, but you missed it by a little bit. Stop using those goals. This stuff is 1,000 years old, and every year there are sixth graders who become valedictorians by the time they go to 12th grade. It's only a couple years later. And then there's so many high schools, and next year they're going to be valedictorians as well, and the year after that, and the year after that, across tens of thousands of high schools.
hmm
Don't use that carrot. That's a terrible carrot, by the way, right? Use the fact that this stuff is 1,000 years old, 500 years old, hundreds of years old. Come on.
You should be able to learn like that. And
Yeah.
that lets you achieve higher things with that mentality.
Get rid of all that stuff perfectly, right?
hmm
Because it's not even your concern. So stupid, right? Stop focusing on that. Stop staying in one job, not because you want to get a higher salary, but because you need to get a PhD in retirement so that you can know how to function every day without someone writing you a paycheck. Imagine if you could perfect that. So it's nobody's business. It doesn't matter anymore, but you still play because you're here and you want to contribute and you want to solve problems. Difficult to solve problems. The harder, the better. You
Yeah,
need knowledge. You need a lot of knowledge so that you don't have to go and like, be stuck doing unknowledgeable things.
exactly.
Yeah. Right. So collecting rent is not a hard thing to do. Right. So
No,
right. So I went into real estate not for the purpose of collecting rent. Right. I went into real estate and I could have bought houses, right? Because that's what the book Rich Dad Poor Dad talks about. Buying
Mhm.
a house, right? And then renting it out and something like that. I don't want to do that. That's not why I aced the 1,000-year-old material, right? You don't ace the 1,000-year-old material just to be that. You don't become summa cum laude in college so that you could be summa cum laude. That's like the
No,
stupidest thing, right? Okay, so you graduate so that okay, you can always have the word summa cum laude on your diploma. That's silly, isn't it? Just
of
like
course.
being number one, just like
No one's going to see that diploma.
well, they do initially, right? But then they stop looking at it. Even for the kid who can sing like Elvis, eventually someone will say, I miss Elvis, the real one. You're just a fake because you sound like Elvis. And that would be heartbreaking if you ever run into that, right? Because you spend all those hours to sound like Elvis, tens of thousands of hours just to sound like Elvis. Kind of
hmm
ridiculous, right? When you think about it, right?
Exactly.
So, so why do it to yourself? right? When you're being tested as a sixth grader on that 1,000-year-old material, don't get that stuff wrong. And don't do it because, you'll get that video game or you get that prize. Don't do it for the prize. Don't do it to be number one. Do it because that stuff is so old and ancient that you should not be getting stuff like that wrong. And then what'll happen when you have all your knowledge there, it'll start coming to you. What we're talking about. You will be able to perfect things that you enjoy, things that how you want to feel. Like I want to feel free. So certainly I have to know how to collect rent, right? But more than rent, as in many of the interviews that will be coming out, those are for adults, but adults are listening to this for their kids. So I
Yes.
went and created a way to prevent asphalt from breaking down because that's a sizable cost for people who own real estate. And I own real estate. So I want to change the cost structure. Make sense?
Yeah, that does make
Yeah.
sense.
Now, do you know I noticed by owning parking lots, malls and places like that where people park, is I noticed that the 50th spot from the entrance that everyone wants to go to, nobody wants to park there. Would you agree? Who wants to park on the 50th spot, right?
No, nobody.
Yeah, but that spot has a pothole. So guess what happens if I hire someone to fix the pothole? They're going to use the same pave mix as they use where the 18-wheeler truck parks and breaks all the things all the time. Why are you using the same pave mix? They don't know any better. But you're listening to this and thinking like you should change the pave mix structure. So if I put almost nothing there, like nothing graphene, like nothing there, but in the area where the 18-wheeler goes, I put a lot of graphene, right? And graphene is stronger than diamond, and people can look that up. And then what you'll have is you'll have a stronger reinforced area where the 18-wheeler is and where no one parks. You just saved on all your costs. But if you did everything equally, your costs would be so much higher. And now you could become cost competitive, right? Because the goal is to become cost competitive and save money. So what I'm saying is that you'll learn how to think once you are able to answer all the other questions right with a lot of effort, obviously. It is hard to get everything right. But now you have a very different motivator. Is that stuff is so stupid? It's so inferior. It's 1,000 years old or 500 years. Why the hell are you getting that wrong? Come on, man. We have to go find another planet. We have to go and fix the climate extremes. We got to solve all these problems. You're getting all these things wrong. So how are you supposed to, when you need to think on your own, be able to think right when you can't get the algebra correct or the calculus or the physics? Newtonian mechanics? Really? You got a B in that? You got a 97 on that? No, you should only get 100 because that stuff is that inferior. It's been around for a very, very, very long time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Calculus was initially, right? Around in like, I think in the 1500s, something like that, where it was
How are you going
initially.
to invent new things if you can't master the things that are already invented?
That's right. So you should take all the stuff in high school and look at them and say, and you're going to lock me up for 12 years? Starting in first grade, right? You're allowing me for 12 years to study 1,000+ year old material, 500-year material. And guess what you're going to do in 4 years of college? You're going to do the same thing, just you're going to do a little bit more of it. You don't
Exactly.
really innovate, right? But you're also in college, you're going to borrow a lot of money to also not innovate. And then you're going to have a good time because there's going to be all these um, parties and things to go to, right? And the world's going to fall apart because that's where we all know it's happening, right? So because we just don't have any fear of the inevitable, which is we just don't know what we're doing. We're not smart enough. We don't go and get rid of all the 1,500-year-old material when we're 10 years old, right? That's when we have energy, by the way, right? So we have a lot of energy to learn. Our brain's soft, and we can learn all these things. And then someone might laugh at you're 10 years old and you know scientific notation, and you should answer, I'm doing this because I need to. I have something else I need to do to save the human species, right? We're gonna have outbreaks. I don't know if people know that the bird flu now transmits over to cows, and if you spray cow's milk on another animal called the ferret, now the ferret gets bird flu through the cow's milk that has bird flu. I mean, that just happened this year, 2024.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So now I can't have bird, which is chicken. I might not have steak because it's cow. So I don't eat ferret. So, but that's okay. But what happens if it jumps into humans, right? So we have a lot of risk. The point is, we have a lot of risk, and people are still practicing to sing like Elvis, as an example, right? They're just practicing to measure who's number one. When we had number one last year, and the one before we had number one, where did they go and how far did they reach, and are your human problems solved? That's
Mm,
what tonight is about, right? You asked me the question, and that's why I say, we don't even have our heads put on right.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to all sixth graders listening, to be more unique, don't follow just what you see online because it looks cool and learn a lot.
Yeah. They make it look like it's really cool, by the way, when you invent an app or other things. But what is the app going to do for humanity's future,
Exactly. Nothing.
right? When you start really deeply thinking about, we might no longer have the human species growing exponentially as the right answer on the test question, because in the future we may not be growing exponentially anymore.
Mhm.
All right. So yeah, answers keep changing because there's deep threats. There are situations that are happening. Imagine you become really wealthy, right? A lot of people say wealth is really important because we measure that. And then you have a summer home, and then you have two homes and three homes. Yeah, how's that helping humanity?
No, it isn't. It's taking
No.
space.
Right. So yeah, but it does show off that you can achieve that, right? And you drive a nicer car, but a car is a car is a car is a car,
Mhm.
right? For the scientists, for the people looking for innovation, the engineers, when you really go further, you realize these things I'm talking about. As a car
Mhm.
is a car is a car is a car is a piece of a shirt is a shirt is a shirt is a shirt. Now we do put on certain things, but what happens? Do you know that every time someone reaches a certain amount of wealth, they stop buying the nice clothes and the things with the names on them?
Yeah, it doesn't make much of a difference.
Yeah, because you wore those things because you thought it would make a difference amongst those who were hiring you. But once you don't need to be hired by anybody, then you ask yourself, will I treat myself better? Now, if you do though, then you should continue to buy those clothing. But if you don't, right, then you shouldn't. There is a difference between brands and no brands, like no frills, because sometimes the stitching isn't as good, and then you might not look at yourself as positively. Some people need that, right?
Yeah.
Or if you don't wear nice shoes, sometimes it's made out of animal, and now your feet smell, right?
Mm.
Faster than you get stinky feet faster than you would otherwise because it was made out of leather versus like I don't know, dog parts or something. I don't know. But I mean, it's just like maybe the animal isn't fully cured. I'm just saying that there is a difference between certain qualities that some brand names cars do ride smoother and they're softer on your spine and your hip. But the point of it is determine it for yourself how you want to feel. Don't base it off of, you know, names and what other people are saying.
Mhm.
And develop that skill, right? Is retire more times just to make sure that you're going to be okay when you're retired, right? Because you've retired, the more times you retire, the less uncomfortable will become because you already tried working on really uncomfortable things. I when I taught IB in high school, and because they had a section that was completely on carbon chemistry and graphene, um, I once told kids in high school that one year I taught, and there's that TED talk, Inventing Happiness, that I worked on graphene. They said, that's impossible. If you worked on graphene, which they saw my name, but they said maybe that's someone else's name that you share. same name. If you worked on graphing, you wouldn't be our high school teacher.
No.
That's how programmed everyone was, that high school teachers are largely unsuccessful individuals.
Hmm.
It's hard to like be motivated in high school if you don't think your teachers are successful, right?
Hmm.
But maybe your teachers aren't successful, but that's not the point. Is get rid of all of that stigma and don't use your teachers being successful as your driver to do well, right? Use the fact that this stuff is so old that it's a freaking joke that we get them wrong. We shouldn't get anything wrong because we have to go and solve some of these mega problems that is going to make it really uncomfortable as things get worse. We've created this system called money to get everybody like, distracted, right? So they don't really think a lot about other things. So, and then you go and accumulate the money so you can buy multiple homes and other things. But imagine you look back in your life and say, did I really add anything to the human species? No. For someone who's 30, 40, 50 years old, 60 years old, that's too late. But we're talking about building a show and a series to motivate sixth graders, right? So that they can become a force that solves future problems for humanity. So now
Yes.
you're right. So now you're not going to, because both of you and I are older than sixth graders. And we want to think about how can we make them so excited that they become unstoppable. They become better than us forever. And that's the key, right? We don't want sixth graders that just like replicate and keep looping like all the other sixth graders who became 12th graders and 12th graders who became college, right?
I think
Graduates.
we need to show them the end, like what's at the end, like
Well, the
what's
end.
like.
If you show them where you're going even, right? Why do you even do this, right? You know, what high school senior is going to be doing this because you realize that if you could have changed how your ecosystem was set up when you were in sixth grade, your entire
It's
mindset would be different. Can I
because
give you a deeper example about how do you remember when you're not old enough to really remember this, but do you remember the Great Recession?
yeah, back in 2008, 2005,
Yeah, what were you doing?
I was not born yet.
Okay, so how do you remember that?
I read about it.
Okay, you read about it. Yeah, let me tell you, do you know that John F. Kennedy did not go through, like, he didn't remember the Great Depression?
He was young. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, people who don't know, and you just read about it, reading about things doesn't mean you really can feel it, right?
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So that tells you, right? So let's look up the year that John F. Kennedy was born. He was born on May 29th, 1917. Okay. And when was the Great Depression? That was around that time, right? Let's see. The Great Depression timeline was 1929 until 1941. So he definitely knew the Great Depression.
It
But
was
if
rough.
you looked up John F. Kennedy's life, he was wealthy. His family was completely like they didn't have to suffer through the Great Depression.
Hmm.
They weren't suffering. So you take 1929 and then minus 1917, and he was 12 years old. All right, but it lasted until 1941. So minus 1917, then we get the age of 24. Okay, so from 12 all the way to 24. He went through the Great Depression, but his family was completely um like immune to it, right? So there's people who live through things, but they don't suffer um the thing. So 1929, just to give some background, you got Wall Street crash, Dust Bowl began, food riots in 1931. President Roosevelt was elected in 32. And then we had the New Deal. And then, by the way, President Roosevelt was president for 4 terms. 4 terms, never before. And every president now only serves 2 terms. So the point of it is that there are people who are unscathed and they're shielded from certain events. And then there are people like you who weren't even born yet. It's not your fault. You just weren't born yet, so you don't know. You've only seen one side of things, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the issue becomes we don't know how bad the future is going to be because we don't know how bad this climate stuff is going to affect us. We don't really know how bad AI is going to affect us. We just don't know. What we do know something for sure is that every time parents ask their kids to go and be number one, that it isn't really a solution for humanity's problems. Some number one individuals do end up having the ability to buy a few houses, summer homes, and things like that. Some of those number ones that go to these top places end up in divorce, even though they are able to buy multiple homes and summer homes. They still end up suffering from divorce or bad circumstances, right?
Mhm.
And still, some people retire the first year and they die that same year, and still others retire and they live so long that they run out of money. So should be the point be to keep going after money, right? Or and being number one, or is it to, like I was saying, practice being able to retire from projects, from various things, live a life that you can be independent? Doesn't that mean that you had to have a well command of the knowledge base so that you can be free? Otherwise, you'll be only doing the same profession, the only one profession the whole time, right? To teach chemistry in high school, to teach science in high school, and that wasn't hard for an inventor in the space of chemistry and physics and things like that, right? So that allows you to then retire, right? From one profession to the other. And then because you have the knowledge to move on, you can then retire from teaching high school, right? And then you can teach college, like research and graduate students, things like that, and become a co-principal investigator. Of course, you can also teach your children, and then you can also do homeschool, and you can then maybe go and invent something in asphalt. But asphalt has nothing to do with the initial work in the graphene. Doesn't matter. It's because it's materials, it's science, and has something to do with what I'm facing. And isn't potholes what a lot of people face? Then you work on that. So let the results, but your full ability to throttle the knowledge drive you. And then build your own story. Don't go and copy what I just said about asphalt and do that. Say, oh, I want to do. Then you're just like learning to sing like Elvis when Elvis is gone. Go do your own thing, but make sure you leave no rocks of knowledge unturned. Learn it all, gobble it up. Don't let anybody stop you. Don't waste time. We good? I think I lost you there. Not sure if you're there. I'm going to stop the recording. I don't hear you. All right. So, what I was talking about was don't waste time.
Mhm.
Gobble up as much knowledge as possible.
Mhm.
Don't waste time. I was once interviewed on what book do I recommend people to read, and I said one of the most powerful books is 1984 by George Orwell, because some of the stuff he predicts comes true. But I'm not going to recommend that book. I recommend reading the Harvard Business Review. And that was my answer to a host. The interview hasn't come out yet, but it'll come out sometime in maybe late August or early September. He says, why don't you recommend the book, 1984? I said, because I could do better than recommending a book that so many people have read, right? I want to recommend reading about case studies and it's free. You don't even have to subscribe, and you get a few case studies. If you do subscribe, then you get like 8 or 9 case studies, maybe 10. And then if you want to pay, then you get, $20 a month.
I see. I see. So Harvard Business School includes case studies of such people. Hello?
Um, I think that when you think about where things could go and what you could learn with your time, and if you keep reading things that everybody else reads, then you're just going to have groupthink. If you read something like Harvard Business Review, there's so many case studies. And notice I didn't list all which cases you read. Just read and learn more about different cases, and then you'll grow. Right? Stop reading what everybody else reads. Stop listening and pointing to who's successful. It doesn't matter. What's most important is that you become successful through having enough knowledge in your basis to don't waste time. Right.
Exactly.
Right. And
Mhm.
don't have not enough knowledge so that now you are stuck having to not be able to retire. See, if you retirement is the combination of one, do you have enough money to stop doing what you're doing? Number two, though, is will someone else hire you to do something else? Right. And will they hire you for more? Because oftentimes we don't retire from what we're working on because if we go anywhere else, we'll be paid less. So then we stay in doing what we're doing. And then what happens is our age or our condition eliminates us. But if you had enough knowledge, you
Mhm.
see your dad studying all the time or mom studying all the time.
No.
Why not?
They have enough knowledge already.
Really? Nobody has enough knowledge. I'm studying all the time.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh,
Well, you know that. You know I'm learning all the time.
yeah,
Reading
of
things
course. But
like that. Yeah.
I,
But see,
I think, yeah, yeah. So,
my kids study more than I do.
uh-huh.
My kids know how to write and read Chinese. I can't read and write Chinese. So I tell them that the reason why you can do that and I can't is because you have more time than me. I have the responsibility of paying for your dinner, your meals, your other things, right? Your
Mhm.
parents can't learn as much as they would like or keep learning as much as they used to because they have the responsibility to take care of family. Like they have to go buy food, cook food, do things like that, chores. As you grow older and become an adult, you'll have chores.
Mhm.
Yeah, if no one does the chores, the whole thing falls apart. Cutting the grass takes time, right? And
Yeah.
also, it's distracting. You can't cut the grass and then work on physics anymore.
No.
Yeah, it's because it's so, you can't even collect rent and work on physics because it's so different. You need focus. Einstein kept learning physics when he was, he developed the physics that we know today, right? So why is someone able to do that, right? Yeah.
Because they have the freedom to do,
And then once you have the freedom, you also have to have the basis to do that, right?
which
Right?
is
What if
hard.
you had the freedom, but you don't know where to start? Or if you started, it would be it would be embarrassing, right? And a
Yeah,
64-year-old sitting in the sixth grade class, right? Yeah.
exactly.
1598, Bonaventura Cavalieri was born, dies in 1647, in the 60s, later 60s. But he was a Franciscan monk who had the ability to work on infinitesimal calculus as a precursor. So
Hmm.
he is the forefather before any of the other stuff, um, and of calculus,
Hmm.
right? Yeah, because he was a monk, he didn't have a lot of chores to do.
I mean, monk, so what do they do? They meditate and study.
Yeah, so if that's all you have to do. You can kind of like you don't even have to have a wife,
No.
so therefore you don't have to have children, right?
Yeah.
So he was an Italian mathematician looking at finding answers to the truth. Yeah,
Wow.
and Harvard, the entire Latin for Harvard, and their motto is veritas, and veritas in Latin means truth seeking, right? For the truth. So every Harvard diploma is we're looking for veritas, which is truth.
I see.
Yeah. Which is like a great purpose, right? To seek the truth.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you can only seek the truth if you have time, right? You have freedom, right? You have independence. You have enough food on your table. And then you
And
hold
I think
something
that's
on
why
a
it's
knowledge basis.
so important that people do it as young as possible, at sixth grade, because that's the time they have nothing to worry about. They have 6 more years where everything's provided for them. A bus takes them to school. They don't need to drive, do whatever they want. And that's such
Yeah.
a valuable time.
So if you take that time and you just like follow the schedule, you'll be behind because the schedule, someone said, okay, 12th grade, you need to know this, 11th grade, you should just like rush right through that because you already
Exactly.
have all the capability to learn on your own by your time you're 12.
Yeah, exactly. You have knowledge, you have the internet. What more do you need than the internet?
Well, the problem is the internet has false things in there. So what you need to know is you need to have done really well in your basis so that you can become perceptive on what's true and what isn't true,
Exactly.
right? And you need to be going to college when you're 12.
Oh, at 12.
Yeah, and you need to be finished by the time you're 14.
Hmm.
Yeah. But that's again on the timeline that someone else has set, right? College or high school. You need to go beyond all of that and keep driving your own, your own desire to go further. Build that knowledge until you can no longer have the freedom because you chose to have a family. Like I chose to have a family, so I'm not free to do what I did in sixth grade or what I did when I was seventh grade or eighth grade. I didn't have the same freedoms. And worse is I don't have the freedom to um, to have that much energy. My energy level is not the same as a 6 year old. You know, a 6 year old or an 8 year old or 10 year old, they can gobble up their food, go out and play, and then come back in and then gobble up more food. You know, as an adult, if you did that and went out and played like that, you'd have indigestion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the body ages and the brain ages and the eyes age and you're not able to absorb as much and you have to work so much harder to remember things. Yeah. So when you have the time, because all sixth graders have the time, don't waste that time.
And because maybe by 12, you'll be making enough money to continue doing enough income streams.
I don't think about money. I think about freedom because in order to have freedom, you do have to have money, right? But
Yeah.
if you think about me money, you might not have freedom. There's a lot of people who have a lot of money without any freedom because they set it up so that they actually don't have any freedom.
Hmm.
They don't have the freedom to retire because they're making so much money, right? You're making so much money in a job, you're not going to go and become a teacher. Yeah, but the teaching stuff taught me that how I should, be reminded when I still could of what I knew when I was in high school.
Hmm.
So then when I need to make a choice of what should I do for my kids, no high school is going to teach them how to compose in Chinese, compose music in Chinese.
Hmm.
Yeah. Why would you want to compose music in Chinese? They have Chinese heritage. Also, if they compose music in Chinese and they write and read in Chinese, they're better than dad. But isn't that the point, right? To be better than dad as soon as possible. I don't want you to like go and keep working on something and then say, oh, be better than that by how much you make. No, just pick something. And then, anything I don't know, you're already better than me.
Hmm.
Yeah. And there is some peer pressure because now my youngest one says, dad doesn't know how to read this word and that word. That's good. That's good. Keep embarrassing me because that's what you need to do. You need to go further. I want you to go further.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah. It's all out of love. That's why this interview, when you ask the question of Mark Zuckerberg programming at 6 years old, I use the example of singing like Elvis, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, it now shows you how the contrast is be you, figure it out. But in order
Yeah.
to do that, you have to ace all of the material and not get anything wrong. Not getting anything wrong gets you 100. Getting something wrong means 97. If a teacher brought back 97 students on a 100-person field trip, that would not be an A. It wouldn't
Exactly.
be an A plus. It would be jail time or something. I don't know. But
Yeah.
it wouldn't be good, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
So,
think this episode really is going to change perspectives of young minds and for the parents there too. I hope the parents also listening to this are going to kind of start feeding their kids these ideologies
mm,
and ways of doing things.
that's the point is that we need enough people to change in order for change to happen. And enough people to change is not when the leopard has the spots on them. It's hard for adults. Tell them, give up your job even though you're making all this money. Go find something else so that you can learn how to retire a few times. Yeah, who's going to do that?
Nobody.
It's a lot easier to go learn all the material that's 1,000 years old and make sure you don't get anything wrong. 500 years old, don't get anything wrong. 300 years old, don't get anything wrong. 100 years old, don't get anything wrong. That's a lot easier, right?
Mhm.
So when it's so much easier, go do it. Make sure it's true. And then I promise you, if you do that, you will be able to look at life through a completely different lens pretty instantaneously. You'll
Mhm.
become immune to practically most of the things that drag people down. You'll have superpowers relative to everybody else
Yes.
because now you'll be itching to go and create new things. But not to have learned everything really well, guess what happens? You're always gonna think, oh, is that the right answer? Is that new or is that old? You'll always be wondering about that. Stop doing that to yourself. Graphene is carbon, all carbon. It's an allotrope of diamond. Diamond's not conductive. They said that's why carbon is a non-metal, but it conducts electricity, graphene, better than copper. Hmm. And copper's a metal. Hmm. Well, so again, innovation allows you to go beyond the textbook. What's written in the textbook will not give you a patent. It's the creation of new information that is patentable that may end up becoming new textbooks in the future.
Mhm.
But the goal, remember, is not to make more textbooks. The goal is to keep innovating, learn all the knowledge that already exists. Don't waste time. That's what it is.
Yes.
All right. And then you're going to have to chop up all kinds of these things so that it can be nice and succinct so they don't have to waste time listening to all this, right?
Yeah.
Just
Will do.
the succinct version.
Yeah. I'll use some AI tools.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to stop the recording. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.